December 29th, 1170. Canterbury Cathedral, England, is filled with awestruck congregants. Nobles, clergy, and commoners alike all gathered for Vespers, anticipating the solemn beauty of the evening service. At the center, before the high altar, stands a man of imposing stature, his face etched with a quiet resolve. His vestments, once a symbol of immense power and royal favor, now hint at defiance. This man, once the most powerful in the kingdom after the king himself, will meet his end today in a manner so shocking that it will echo through the centuries. His name is Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury, and former chancellor to King Henry II of England. Within moments, his spilled blood will consecrate the very stones of the cathedral, serving as a brutal testament to the eternal struggle between spiritual and temporal power. To understand how Thomas Becket came to this tragic end, we must go back in time and explore the complex web of loyalty, ambition, faith, and defiance that defined England in the mid-12th century. Thomas Becket was born around 1118, the son of Gilbert Becket, a prosperous merchant, and Matilda. Born into a respectable, though not noble, family, young Thomas had a promising start in life. His early career saw him rise through the ranks of the Archbishop of Canterbury's household, displaying sharp intellect and administrative skill. The opportunity for advancement came when Henry II ascended to the throne in 1154. The new king was already known for his fierce determination to restore royal authority after years of civil war. His first choice for Chancellor, Thomas Becket, quickly became his most intimate friend and trusted advisor. As Chancellor, Becket proved an exceptional servant to the crown, aligning himself entirely with the king's will, even participating in military campaigns and leading troops. He was renowned for his opulent lifestyle, mirroring the king's own grandeur, and effectively managed the kingdom's finances and legal affairs. The relationship between Thomas and Henry II deepened, and Becket's power grew exponentially. He held a position of extreme intimacy that allowed constant access to the royal person. Simultaneously, Thomas strengthened his position through his indispensable service to the king. As the relationship between Thomas and Henry II deepened, Becket developed an unyielding devotion to his sovereign's interests. He used his influence to support the king's policies, often at the expense of ecclesiastical privileges. When temporarily engaged in campaigns, he even led armies, demonstrating a shocking display of disregard for traditional clerical roles. When the Archbishop of Canterbury died in 1162, Henry II saw an opportunity. He appointed Becket to the highest ecclesiastical office in England, believing his loyal chancellor would continue to serve royal interests within the church. However, what made the situation even more explosive were the changes that rapidly consumed Becket. Once consecrated as Archbishop, Thomas Becket underwent a profound transformation. He shed his lavish lifestyle, adopting austere habits and dedicating himself with fervent zeal to the rights and liberties of the church. He resigned as chancellor, a move that deeply offended Henry II, who saw it as a personal betrayal. The primary point of contention became the constitutions of Clarendon in 1164. A set of proposals by Henry II aimed at limiting the independence of the church and bringing clergy under royal jurisdiction, particularly regarding criminal offenses. Becket initially conceded, then fiercely resisted, arguing that clergy should only be tried in ecclesiastical courts. Chroniclers of the time highlighted this dramatic shift, interpreting it as divine inspiration or a newfound commitment to his spiritual duties, yet Henry saw it as stubborn defiance. Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine, Henry II's wife, and the powerful French court were particularly invested in the ongoing struggle. Humiliated by the evident challenge her husband faced from his former friend, Eleanor, like many, viewed Becket's actions as an unforgivable obstruction of royal authority. In 1164, after intense conflict over the constitutions, Becket fled England for France, seeking papal support. Even Becket's allies were pressured by Henry, and his property was confiscated. Becket's defiance found an outlet when, in France, he gained the support of Pope Alexander III and King Louis VII. who provided him with refuge and leveraged their influence against Henry. In 1170, after 6 years of exile, a fragile reconciliation was brokered between Henry and Becket. What surprised Henry and his court was Becket's immediate return to asserting ecclesiastical authority upon his arrival in England. Excommunicating several bishops who had crowned Henry's son, young Henry, against papal instruction and Becket's own archiepiscopal rights. Years of growing tension, perceived insolence, and fierce resistance had created widespread frustration among the king's loyalists. With the collapse of support for his authority, Henry II, in a moment of fury, uttered the fateful words, "Will no one rid me of this troublesome priest?" While historical accounts vary on the exact phrasing, the sentiment was clear. 4 of his knights took his words as a royal command. On December 29, 1170, they confronted Becket and Canterbury Cathedral. The knights, Reginald Fitzurse, Hugh de Morville, William de Tracy, and Richard le Breton, initially intended to arrest him. Becket, refusing to yield, stood firm in the transept. The confrontation quickly escalated. Becket was struck down by the knights' swords, his brains reportedly scattered on the cathedral floor. His murder, before the altar of his own cathedral, shocked Christendom. The specific brutality of Thomas Becket's execution had multiple purposes. On one hand, it served as a horrific end to a deeply personal and political conflict. On the other, it was a desperate, if misguided, attempt to reassert royal supremacy over the church. The sacrilege of the act, however, had the opposite effect. Just 3 years later, in 1173, Thomas Becket was canonized as a saint by Pope Alexander III. His shrine at Canterbury became one of the most important pilgrimage sites in medieval Europe, a testament to his martyrdom and the enduring power of his cause. Henry II, consumed by remorse and facing excommunication, performed public penance at Becket's tomb in 1174, walking barefoot through the streets of Canterbury and being scourged by monks. This act symbolized the king's submission to ecclesiastical authority and the profound impact of Becket's death. The reign of Henry II and the rise and fall of Thomas Becket remain one of the most turbulent periods in medieval English history. For centuries, the narratives about these men were shaped by their legendary conflict. Henry was portrayed as a tyrannical king seeking absolute power, while Becket was venerated as a defender of faith and clerical liberties. Modern historians offer a more nuanced view. On one hand, they recognize that Thomas Becket was indeed a strong-willed and uncompromising figure, whose sudden embrace of ecclesiastical privilege alienated even his former allies. On the other, they acknowledge that Henry II's desire for legal and administrative reform was legitimate, though his methods were often heavy-handed. Whatever the true nature of their personal relationship, the fate of Thomas Becket illustrates the dangerous intersections between power, religion, and politics in medieval England. His murdered body served as a graphic warning of what happened when someone challenged the king, but also of the immense spiritual authority wielded by the church. The story of Thomas Becket also offers us reflections on how justice could be brutally enacted in medieval society, and how martyrdom could transform a political dispute into a sacred legend. The punishment of Becket's body, particularly his public assassination within the cathedral, was laden with meanings about spiritual independence, royal overreach, and the restoration of divine order. The fall of Thomas Becket was as spectacular as his rise. In a few years, he went from the king's closest confidant to a defiant archbishop, only to end up as a martyr whose blood stained the cathedral floor. His story remains one of the most dramatic examples of the fluctuations of religious and political fortune in medieval history. In a final irony, the very king who sought to subdue the church was ultimately humbled by the enduring power of the saint he inadvertently created. Almost 850 years later, the story of Thomas Becket continues to fascinate and disturb. His story has been dramatized in plays, historical novels, and television series, often portrayed as the archetype of the unwavering man of God standing against secular tyranny. Today we can look at Thomas Becket's brutal murder with horror recognizing the extreme cruelty that marked the medieval power struggles. At the same time, his story reminds us that the dynamics of power, religious conviction, and the exploitation of privileged positions are not phenomena exclusive to the distant past. The Archbishop, murdered in his own cathedral, offers us a distant but still relevant mirror to reflect on the complex interactions between power, faith, greed, and justice that continue to shape our societies.